So why do so-called economic experts keep ignoring the growth dividend of tax cuts? Joining me now is Florida Congressman Greg Steube and EJ Antoni, who has never ignored the growth effects of tax cuts. Unleash Prosperity Senior Fellow. Gentlemen, good to see you. Captain Steube, let me go to you first, and we'll talk about the big, beautiful bill in a second. But I continues to tick off people like me and EJ when we hear this talk about the cost of extending the tax cuts that have brought in so much revenue. I mean, why are some of your colleagues so resistant to the idea of the incentives that come with tax rate cuts?
Yeah, I don't know why my colleagues, or some of them, aren't supportive of this, but this is going to be the largest tax decrease to the American people. If we don't do this, 64% of Americans are going to see their taxes increase. Small businesses are going to see their 199A deduction go up by 20%. We can't let that happen. We have to support our small businesses. We have to support Americans. We can't let their taxes go up. It's a huge impact. And, oh, by the way, CBO, when they scored the last TCJA 5 years ago, they grossly underestimated the economic output that comes to the revenues from the increasing of economic prosperity. When the taxes go down, businesses flourish, more businesses open, and they're able to hire more people.
And EJ, that ratio between debt, between the GDP in general and the size of government becomes better, and the whole economy improves as a result of it. But I just have to, I know that all tax cuts are not equal, that some are more supply side oriented, more revenue churning than others. And I question things like some of the things like the no tips. I'm not sure whether that would actually bring in more revenue, but it would certainly get people to work harder, wouldn't it?
Well, absolutely, David. And in this one particular, the reason why it works so well is the fact that for each marginal dollar that the Treasury wants to take in terms of tipped income, in other words, every additional dollar of tax revenue that they want to get out of someone's tipped income, they need to spend a dollar to make that happen. In other words, it's a net gain of zero. It makes no sense. And so by getting rid of that entire mechanism, you don't actually even affect revenues to the Treasury. But at the same time, as you pointed out, that provides a huge incentive for people to work more, for them to work harder, be more productive, more efficient, et cetera.
Yeah, when people get to keep more of what they earn, they have a tendency to work harder and to invest more if they're investors. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, how can you not count that into projections? But let's move on to the big, beautiful bill, Congressman, because so much has happened today. Of course, it did pass, just barely passed the Senate. It was 50-50 tie. The vice president was the tiebreaker. And some congressmen who've been looking over, as I'm glad they're doing, the details of how the Senate changed it, particularly in the last few hours, noticed some things. And we mentioned before that the extension of the Green New Deal stuff that was going on, that's extended now in a way that it wasn't before. People like Chip Roy, who did vote for it, despite his misgivings the last time, says that it's a deal breaker this time. So what is likely to change when the House gets it? And will they be able to make the changes to satisfy folks like Chip before Friday, before hopefully it lands on the president's desk?
Yeah, before Friday would mean it would have to go back to the Senate and they'd start the whole vote-a-rama again. So from a timing perspective, we wouldn't be able to do that. The speaker has made it clear that he wants to pass this bill in the House and get it to the president's desk by Friday. So the only way to do that is to pass this bill. So if we don't pass it and they do try to amend it, but they won't be able to do that in the amount of time. The president wants it on his desk. If they try to amend it, then it's going to slow things down. And obviously, we're not going to hit that July 4th timeline. We do have 3 more weeks in D.C. before the big recess in August. So there's certainly time to do that. But the speaker has said we're going to be voting on the rule tomorrow morning. And after we vote on the rule, we're going to be voting on the bill. So if there's members that don't vote for that rule, then there's going to have to be negotiations to get them to a yes.
Well, you know Chip very well. What do you think? Is he? I mean, I see him as saying I'm not going to budge unless we're able to get this rule out of there. This rule concerning the Green New Scam, as he calls it.
Yeah, there's quite a few that have said that there are no, but some of those people, obviously, once they talk to the White House and talk to the president, there's a lot of things that can change between now and when we vote. But if there's more than 3 people that vote no, they're not going to be able to pass the rule and they're not going to be able to pass the bill, which means we will have to amend it and then send it back to the Senate to get it to a place where the House is going to want it. The problem is if we amend it again, obviously there's other people in the conference, like moderates, who may not like the changes that are made. And then when we go to the Senate, they got to do this process all over again, which obviously will take a couple of weeks.
I see one person making the difference, and that's Donald Trump. And that's if he
right.
really puts the pressure on. EJ, final question to you. Rescission, the great act of rescission, the process of rescission. Can the stuff that bothers so much Chip Roy and, frankly, me and other people that care about government spending more money than they should, more money than they have, could rescission be used after the big, beautiful bill is signed to really cut back a lot more than this bill perhaps should have?
I think that's definitely plausible, David. And look, I share those concerns. If I had my druthers, we would have been slashing and burning when it comes to the federal budget. But look, you have to pass a bill that can actually pass. So I understand where both sides are coming from here. But in terms of rescissions, let's also remember the president has another tool, what they call pocket rescission, which works kind of like a pocket veto. And so I'm looking forward with a lot of anticipation to right before the end of this fiscal year, they will hopefully put together a lot of pocket rescissions that, if Congress doesn't act, will go through, and that should cut a lot from the federal budget. So, again, very, very hopeful that the White House is going to make that happen.
Yeah. But first comes growth, and we need that growth in terms of getting the tax extensions in there. It can't happen soon enough. We got to get money back in people's pockets so they feel the election really affected them personally. Gentlemen, great to see you both. Have a wonderful July 4th celebration.